So, good day to everyone. I am Mr. Levine Andro, and I'm asked to present one response to Eterne Patris, which was made by a Thomasian bishop. So he studied here and he made this response when he was Bishop of Cordoba in Spain. Okay. So let me share with you my presentation. So I titled this presentation as A Thomasian Bishop's Response to Eterne Patris in 1879. So pastoral letter of Seferino Gonzalez as Bishop of Cordoba in Spain. So let me give you a background, on how significant Eterne Patris and how can we directly connect to it in a way as a university and of course our patron Saint Thomas Aquinas. And we also have our one of our alumnus in the person of Cardinal Seferino Gonzalez. So in the 1880s, the University of Santo Tomas had two grand celebrations that were associated with Fray Seferino Gonzalez. So the first festivity was held in 1880 when the university received the encyclical Eterne Patris. The second was when Fray Seferino was raised by the same pope to the dignity of a cardinal in 1884. So I call him as Fray Seferino because that was how he wanted basically us to call him. As we could see in his coat of arms in Cordoba, you would see here frater, because he wanted us to call him as frater. He did not want to be called with certain titles, but he wanted us to be like his brother, and many of his biographers would attest to this. Now, so not many people today are familiar with the person of Cardinal Sefino Gonzalez, but his name was back then, during that time, like a roaring thunder. He ushered many church thinkers into the 20th century, and hopefully we could be able to, in a way, address that kind of dearth, in terms of resources as regards how he influenced these philosophers. And then, um, as regards the Eterne Patris, so Eterne Patris was the encyclical that restored Catholic philosophy. It somehow institutionalized Thomism, or the philosophy of Saint Thomas Aquinas, as a clear guide to philosophically understand and talk about the world. In the West, this papal letter addressed the growing gap between the modernized society and the Catholic Church, whose traditions and worldview draw from teachings that were developed in the medieval ages. This gap was supposedly caused by a series of events which started in the 16th century. No, we'll be discussing more of that later. Among these were the advent of Protestantism, the Galileo affair, so on and so forth. Now, um, so this encyclical, it had the promise of healing the scarred reputation of the church, as we found in the work of Pope Leo XIII. He would be saying that again, clearly distinguishing as is fitting reason from faith, while happily associating one with the other. Both Saint Thomas both preserved the rights and had regard for the dignity of each. So much so, indeed, that reason born on the wings of Thomas to its human height can scarcely rise higher, while faith could scarcely expect more and stronger aids from reason than those which she has already obtained through Thomas. And I unquote. Now, St. Thomas has been the patron of the University of Santo Tomas since the 1600s, so it is understandable now why UST rejoiced when she learned of the encyclical Eterne Patris. Now, but one particular reason for the grand celebration was that the encyclical affirmed the century's worth of missionary labor and evangelization in the Far East. Huh? So the successes of the Dominican order were for the most part due to their commitment to education. Okay? So we'll be discussing more of that later, how important was UST, no, in the revival, we can say second revival of Thomism in the 19th century. Now, as for Fray Seferino, as for Fray Seferino, uh, he studied and taught in the University of Santo Tomas. So in the same institution, he wrote his three-volume work, Estudios sobre la Filosofía de Santo Tomás. Uh, so here, this one. So this would be it would have 3 volumes. This is the first one that he wrote. So 15 years after its publication, Fray Seferino had already returned to Spain and was already Bishop of Cordoba. By this time, he had 4 more books series added to his publications. So, Historia la Filosofía, Filosofía Elementaria, and Estudios Religiosos, excuse me, Filosóficos, Científicos y Sociales. No? 2 had been widely used as textbooks on philosophy in the seminaries across the European continent. So this would be Filosofía Elementaria and yeah, the translation of this in Spanish, which would be um Filosofía Elemental, no, Filosofía Elemental. This is in Latin, and the other one is in Spanish. Now the difference is that Latin, this one was used in the seminaries, and Filosofía Elemental was supposedly written for the use of those who are in the universities in Europe. Okay. So the difference between them is that Filosofía Elementaria, the Latin one, has specific text for the formation of those who would becoming for information to become priests. Okay. Now, so his works are said to have paved the way for the official restoration of Catholic philosophy, as I will be showing a little bit later. So while Fray Seferino was not directly mentioned in Aeterne Patris, no, but he was not directly mentioned in Aeterne Patris, a number of scholars in Spain and in Italy have noted that he somehow influenced Pope Leo XIII's appreciation of Thomistic philosophy, that when Aeterne Patris was written, it was as if Fray Seferino's Sobre la Filosofía de Santo Tomás was present. No? Uh, Particularly, this statement was written by uh, a Dominican scholar from Spain, and he wrote this as part of his dissertation in Madrid at the Instituto Pontificio de Filosofía, Santo Tomas, okay, back in the 90s. Now, let's go to the actual pastoral letter. So because back here, no, this is in a way a very bold statement, a very bold claim. And as as someone researching on this, I still have not found any direct link, no, any direct link of the works of Fray Seferino and Aeterne Patris. However, However, we were able to find several correspondences between Pope Leo the 13th and Fray Seferino. They have letters, no? Some are here in our archives. But what we can find now in terms of the connection between the thoughts of Fray Seferino and Eteri Patris would be practically this pastoral letter that Fray Seferino himself issued after you see, after the promulgation of the Eterni Patris. Excuse me. So this particular work, this pastoral letter was found in the archives of Cordoba, the archives of Cordoba, and it was written in, of course, in Spanish, and we have some of it translated here for reference. Now, this was his, in a way, disclaimer at the start of his pastoral letter, and I read, no, quoting him. After I had received, through the Apostolic Nunciature, the magnificent and wise encyclical of our Holy Father Leo the 13th, referring to the doctrine and philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas, I decided to publish it immediately in the official bulletin of the diocese, and I began to write a few lines in the form of a circular to serve as a heading. No? However, when I was gathering the pages to send to the printer, I observed with some surprise that my pen had slipped imperceptibly and that the content of the pages was not very typical of a simple circular, which is why I believed it appropriate and almost necessary to give it the form of a pastoral letter. So you could see here now how, in a way, how involved Price Frino was in this discussion of the philosophy and thoughts of St. Thomas Aquinas. Right? He was really invested in it. Now, when we read, no, when we read the uh, pastoral letter of Fray Seferino, it actually gives us, uh, well, at least for me as the researcher, it it gives us a different kind of perspective of reading the Eterne Patris. No? Because Eterne Patris, okay, it would be very substantial. We can get the message of it. However, in reading Fray Seferino, it can give us a deeper context and a different kind of understanding of the text. Now, what then would be a kind of context that we can get from Fray Seferino in reading his pastoral letter? So first would be his emphasis. And for him, the emphasis was that there was a need for the church people, not just those who were priests, but also the lay people to understand the doctrine of Saint Thomas, not only in theology. Do not see Saint Thomas just as a theologian, but he was also a philosopher and in a way a scientist. However, the science that he would be referring to here would not be the uh, science that we normally think of. No, when we talk about, for example, faith and reason, that reason, and when we think of reason, we associate it with science, and that kind of science would only be positive sciences. No, in Fray Seferino, when he talks about the science, science for him includes human sciences. And when you say human sciences, this is what we consider today as humanities. So why do we say that? Later on, we'll be talking about Renaissance. And even Renaissance, he has a specific discussion on Renaissance art. Okay? He would even talk about the art in Florence in Italy. Right? But we'll go to that a little bit later. So this is the emphasis, not only theologian, but he would also have contributions in philosophy and science. Now, to guide us, no, in our reading. This is an important insight that Fray Seferino would repeatedly tell us, no. And what is that? A deep historical sense. He wanted us to have a historical sense. Um, it's very important in reading his works, and this gives us a different kind of appreciation of Thomism because he would be one of the first, if not the first, no, to try to go into a philosophical discussion of history. Okay? In the tradition of Thomism, when you talk about philosophical history, there would be the French philosophers Etienne Gilson and Jacques Maritain. Okay? And perhaps in contemporary time, it would be Ephraim Jindrasek, Bonino, no, Serge Bonino would be discussing historical Thomism. But going to Fray Seferino, he was already discussing that in the 19th century. Okay? So he understands St. Thomas. He understands St. Thomas and his thoughts in the context of history. Sorry. Now, when we say now discussing St. Thomas in the context of history, Saint Fray Severino would have a point of departure in his appreciation of Saint of Saint Thomas Aquinas. Okay, and in in the pastoral letter and even in other readings of his works, he would always go back to the inspiration of the 16th century Thomas. Those who participated in the Council of Trent. Right? Now, let's have a brief discussion now on how the Thomistic tradition somehow evolved. So the Thomistic tradition was somehow institutionalized decades after the death of St. Thomas Aquinas, no, in 1274. And also after the condemnation of his propositions by the University of Paris, no, which was then under the bishop. So why was that? In actually from in the 13th century, no, uh I think from 1210 to 1277, there were a number of propositions that were banned, no, condemned as heretical, and most of them would be uh pertaining to the teachings of uh Avicenna and Averroes and Aristotle. And of course, as we know, St. Thomas would be one of those who who borrowed from the wisdom of Aristotle and developed it further. And that was one of the primary reasons why some of his propositions were banned. Now, why was this important? The condemnation was important because that became the event when that the students of St. Thomas Aquinas would defend him and his teachings. And because of that defense, continuous apologies, no, the school of Taoism was somehow formed. Uh, it became the organization was somehow uh, it became clear. Okay? And then after that, there was a decline again in in the appreciation of Saint Thomas Aquinas and also the influence of his works. And this decline uh, was due to a mixture of a lack of approaches towards explaining the thoughts, for example, of Meister Eckhart, no? So, and also the prevalence of the theme against corruption in the Catholic Church, such as in the writings of John Wycliffe. Uh, so if you were able to attend my presentation during the theology week, I discussed John Wycliffe, and he was one of those who were uh, who were going against the corruption in the church. Okay, so that was one of the major themes of his works, and he was not only his case was not an isolated case. There would be a number of them writing on the same theme. Now, in the works of Fray Seferino, the first champions of the revival of Thomism were those who had vibrantly addressed the problems of, firstly, Protestantism using the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas. Okay? And secondly, it would also be in terms of addressing the problems of the society, such as poverty and slavery. Okay, so from historical events such as this example, Fray Seferino deduces that every great movement of Catholic regeneration is accompanied and followed by a great movement of restoration of the doctrine of St. Thomas Aquinas. Okay, now let's have an example. So according to Fray Seferino, um, the first decline of Thomistic thought came during the time, as I mentioned earlier, no, during the time of uh, the rise of corruption in the Catholic Church. And one example that he gave would be the case of uh, Girolamo Savonarola, an ascetic monk, no, the Dominican friar. No, he advocated the destruction of secular art and culture and called for Christian renewal from clerical corruption, despotic rule, and the exploitation of the poor. So if you go to Firenze or in Florence, no, if you go to Florence in Italy, normally what we go when we go there, we go to San Marco, the Convent of San Marco, and see the works of Beato Angelico. No, however, uh, just walking distance from that would be the museum just dedicated to Savonarola, right? And we could see there his life story. Okay? And it was a tragic ending for him because in 1495, he disobeyed and defied the Pope by preaching under a ban, highlighting his campaign for reform with processions, bonfires of the vanities, and pious uh, theatricals. In retaliation, Pope Alexander excommunicated him in May 1497. Okay? And in 1498, okay, a trial by fire was proposed by a rival preacher to test Savonarola's divine mandate. And on May 23, 1498, the church and civil authorities condemned, hanged, and burned the bodies of Savonarola and two other followers of his in the square of Florence. So this is a depiction uh, of that tragic event in history. Okay. So according to Fray Sefino Gonzalez, this was one of the events that somehow mirrored uh, the the decline of sorry, the decline of the influence of the church in a way. Okay. However, for him, fortunately, the 16th century thinkers came, especially during the time of the Council of Trent. Okay? So he identifies at least four. No, he actually identified many, but I'm only presenting here four of the names. So we have Cardinal Cajetan, Tom or Cayetano, Cardinal Cayetano, also called as Tomaso de Vio, Francisco de Vitoria, and Domingo Soto. Uh, these two would be known for their works on international relations, particularly their works on how people in the New World should be uh, treated, basically treating them as human persons as well. Meanwhile, Melchor Cano would be known to, sorry, he would be known to uh, promote a kind of systematic way of understanding theology using the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas. And according to say to and according to Fray Seferino Gonzalez, they all strived and worked seriously to defend and complete the Asian philosophy by means of new truths and new developments, instead of spreading, developing, and perfecting the traditional philosophy. They preferred to follow new paths and adopt new things according to the teachings of St. Thomas. Now, this is important to note. He does not discredit here the importance of studying the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas per se. What he just wants to emphasize here is the need to somehow go out of the echo chamber. Because if we will only be talking about things that were already discussed of by St. Thomas Aquinas, chances are we would only be talking about the same things and we are just repeating something in an echo chamber. So we're in a way we're just listening to ourselves and agreeing to ourselves as well. Okay. So the room of development for Fray Seferino was somehow paved by these thinkers in the 16th century, particularly those participated in the Council of Trent, which address the issues raised by Protestantism. Okay. So, as regards that, he would be giving the statement, and I quote, "It is enough to recall finally that the Council of Trent, one of the most authoritative and august assemblies that centuries have ever seen, in which all the eminences of science and virtue of the Christian nations met, so to speak, placed the Summa Theologiae of St. Thomas next to the Bible to serve as a basis and standard in its discussions and decrees, as our Holy Father Leo the 13th reminds us." So this would be, I think, repeated by our own historian, Father Fidel Villaruel, no? He would be saying that during the Council of Trent, there would be two major books that were used. First was the Bible, and, and second was the Summa Theologiae. Next, another important thing that Fray Seferino wanted to emphasize in his in a way forward, no, his pastoral letter as regards lateran batteries was the importance of St. Thomas Aquinas in the university. Right? Because lateran batteries, di ba, it somehow declared St. Thomas as the patron of the universities, okay, Catholic universities. So why was that? Because according to Fray Seferino, until his time, what he observed in the universities would be this: the lack of the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas, of Catholic philosophy, and the rise of other ideologies that would prove to be um, not so good, no, for the students, and also for 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 the life in the university in general. So what are these ideologies? First would be materialism. But uh having seen his discussion, I think he would be referring to empiricism in this part, no? So it was one of the causes of the second decline of um Thomism, because of the rise of these ideologies, materialism or empiricism. Remember that in empiricism, uh David Hume would in a way deny causality, no? So if it denies causality and causation, it would really be not in congruence with scholastic philosophy, particularly that of St. Thomas Aquinas. And as I mentioned earlier, artistic and social sensualism, which was the main features of the Renaissance. No? Because the shift, there would be now the shift. Instead of thinking of what would be divine, what would be uh, heavenly, artistic and social sensualism shifted our gaze into our our what our own humanity, which in a way is good, but there would be extreme, no, extreme aspects of this that would that would be uh again not in congruence with the philosophy of Saint Thomas Aquinas, and also Protestantism, no, by Martin Luther. And then rationalism, which actually started with René Descartes, but only adopted by his followers, who were uh the rivals of the empiricists. Okay? And also Jansenism. Okay? Fray Seferino also mentioned about Jansenism. Why is that? Because in Jansenism, what he protested against was the thought that uh some or many people are already condemned, no, or they're already damned. They're already damned. And their free will cannot do anything about it. Okay. And also the French Revolution, because according to Fray Seferino, it it resulted in a certain sense of political Caesarism, no, in the 18th century. Okay. So because of these ideologies, uh, attention or appreciation of the thoughts of Saint Thomas Aquinas uh, somehow diminished, if not at all lost. Right? And actually, he mentioned as well in his pastoral letter that during this time, no, the teaching of scholastic philosophy would almost be nil, meaning almost zero in uh in Europe. No? And that is why we could see here the importance of the University of Santo Tomas in Manila, because of course, first would be it would be a product of the University of Santo Tomas. Secondly, it because of our historical situation, that uh the teaching of scholastic philosophy in Manila, in the Philippines, was somehow isolated and insulated from whatever ramblings were happening in Europe. No? So, mas marami pa rin yung discussion of Thomistic philosophy in the Philippines. And it gave us the likes of Seferino Gonzalez, and also Norberto del Prado later on would be teaching and establishing um, theology in Fribourg. No? So there. And in the 19th century, earlier, di ba, we have seen that some of the scholars would be attributing the Eterne Patris not only to Pope Leo XIII, but also to Fray Seferino Gonzalez. But even Fray Seferino Gonzalez would be saying that even before him, there were those few who really wanted to revive the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas. And he identified three. First would be the Spaniard Father Jaime Balmes. No? So Father Jaime Balmes would be diocesan priest. However, he died at a very young age. But now in Spain, particularly in Barcelona, you could see that the Institute of Thomistic Institute there would be named after him. Okay, so it's uh Instituto, sorry, yeah, Instituto Santo Tomas, um Fundación Balmesiana. Okay, so they attribute their Thomistic Institute to Father Balmes. Next would be Jean-Baptiste or Henri Dominique Lacordaire. Okay, so from France. So why is there why would there be two names, no? Because he was born Jean Baptiste. However, he converted, and when he came back to Christianity, he was baptized now as Henri Dominique. Okay, and then also Antonio Rosmini in Italy. So these three were given credit by Fray Seferino Gonzalez. However, he would have reservations because according to Fray Seferino, even these three would have their own inflections given to their own teachings of the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas. Okay? And that's why, according to Fray Seferino, it is good to study them, those who went out or pushed the envelope for explorations outside of the realm of 13th century philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas. We need to understand them and we need to criticize them as well. Okay? And according to Fray Seferino, and I quote, they have shown, among other things, that the doctrine of St. Thomas needs to be known to be appreciated, and that his philosophy, without being absolutely perfect, because it would seem to be a human work, without excluding additions and without rejecting new developments, represents, involves the most solid, harmonious conception, truer on the purely philosophical ground, more deeply and more intimately linked with the religion of Jesus Christ. Okay? And as I was saying a while ago, Fray Seferino would emphasize as well the need to verify from the original source, meaning from the actual work of St. Thomas Aquinas. So it is necessary not to lose sight of the prudent wise warning of the august author of the encyclical when he instills and prevents great care to be taken and this restoration of the doctrine of St. Thomas is a true restoration and not a deceptive and apparent restoration, that the sincere and genuine doctrine of the Holy Doctor be taught and defended, not a doctrine either corrupted or disfigured or falsely attributed to Thomas Aquinas. To achieve this, no, according to Fray Seferino, it would be necessary to go back to the original sources, to the doctrines, at least from the streams whose immediate and legitimate relationship and origin of the Thomistic sources imply undoubtedly authenticity. Okay? And we need experts on that. Okay? And finally, according to Fray Seferino, the main message of the Thomistic restoration would be this: a great movement of Christian purification, a great movement of Catholic restoration, a great movement of religious regeneration had come and has been taking place in the church. Along that Catholic movement as a principle and the result, as an element and a consequence, as a cause and effect of it, another great movement of restoration of the doctrine of St. Thomas in general and of his philosophy in particularly was coming and being carried out. Okay? And to sum it up, basically, Fray Seferino was saying that the restoration of Thomism is actually, or should be read as the restoration of the church. Okay? And the restoration of Thomistic thought would only be a byproduct of it. It should always be the restoration of the church, which should come first. Okay? And we should understand it in that context, not the other way around. Okay? Because the church would be more important even in the philosophy itself of St. Thomas Aquinas. Okay? And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I was able to share something insightful with you today. Thank you very much.